Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are by the fantasy circle because there's this big, beautiful Lagerstromia farii fantasy who, around this time last year, had all sorts of scale insects all over it. No good. Who likes that? Well, we've treated those scale insects. We've learned a thing or two about controlling them, so we got a program for you today. Our top 5 scale pests. Our director of horticulture, Paige here, has scoured the garden and found his top 5 scale pests, and if I'm not mistaken, we've only found 3, which is fair. If we were covering plants, we'd cover, 17, 20, 35 plants in our top 5. But with pests, we don't like them so much. I think 3 makes a rather decent top 5.
It all evens out. You get a lot of plants on tours, and during these talks, you'll get a less few insects.
Yeah, for sure. But pest management is super important, so we are super grateful that you are joining us for what is sure to be a delightful program. Those of you watching this on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I will pass things over to Greg to tell us his top 5, top 3, top however many scale pests.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Before I get started, since I am doing a PowerPoint, I can see who some of the people that are here. A big hello to Eve Thyrum. Miss you, love you. Hope things are well in Philadelphia. Hope to come see you soon. Thank you for joining us. I have spent a lot of my horticulture career talking about creepy crawlers and insects and how to manage them in a sustainable way in your garden, and did a very long tour of duty at the Bartlett Tree Research Lab where we did the same and worked with some incredibly smart people. So I like to share this knowledge on how to control insects and other creepy crawlers in your garden. I'll do what I usually do when I do these things. I'll talk a little bit about some of the resources that I have. I'll share the PowerPoint, and then we'll do questions at the end. But I think I have 5. I'm not sure. Something close to that. But I want to talk about cultural things, how to identify them, what they do to your garden, and we'll end up with a little bit of control measures and that sort of stuff. So the first prop that I have lots of books. I'm one of those people that likes the look of books, and I'd rather have a book than the online version of stuff. Insects that feed on trees and shrubs. The Johnson Lyons book. This was a textbook in college. This is what we shared with our plant healthcare folks whenever we did trainings. It's a companion to the disease of trees and shrubs. Anything you want to know about garden insects is in this book. It's a very good one to have to help you kind of troubleshoot and those sorts of things. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our great resources through NC State Extension. I went online and printed up a bunch of different ones just to satisfy that itch for me, and Extension right here at the top. And you can find pretty much anything, any topic that you're looking for on that wonderful toolbox that NC State has. Any extension service in the country is going to have these. University of Maryland is a go-to for me. They have really good ones. So does Virginia and Virginia Tech. Lots of resources out there for those sorts of things that will kind of help you figure out what's affecting your garden. Also, being proactive, not reactive, being out in your garden and looking for pests before they become problems. I have the bad habit of doing that whenever I visit somebody else's garden. Whenever I go to public gardens, I'm looking to see if there's any bugs or diseases or things out of sorts. I always carry a pocket loop or a hand lens with me. I brought a bigger one with me. You can get these from Amazon, all different sizes and sorts. This particular one has a light in it, which is really, really nice. They make smaller ones that you can actually put a string around and keep it around your neck when you're in the field. This gives you a close-up look at things, and that's a tool that I have with me all the time when I'm scouting and looking for things in the garden. As Blake mentioned, we try to keep the garden clean and free of insects and diseases. We are not immune to them. We kind of err on the side of tough love here, so we have a lot of beneficial insects, which help control scale and other insects. So as I was walking around today looking for some props, I had a hard time finding stuff. That doesn't mean it's not out there. It's not the best time of the year for some of these things, but the typical things that you see from a scale perspective, we don't have a lot of those because we really encourage beneficial insects and we don't do a lot of chemical treatments. Where we do have to lean on that is with our crepe myrtles. We have some legacy trees like the ones behind us. Those we can't afford to get stressed out by the insects, so we do some stronger control measures with that. And I'll talk about that in more detail when I talk about the management of things. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll go through that. We'll look at some props, and then we'll take your questions. So this is bare bones, basic information on scale insects, pests in the garden. I can go in a lot more detail, but I want to keep you all awake and bright-eyed today and in the interest of time. So this is just basic information on scale and what they are, the damage they cause, some of the different types, and take that with a grain of salt. If you want more information, go to some of those resources that I mentioned at the beginning. So there's basically two types of scale. There's hard scale, which are sometimes called armored, and they tend to form a hard structure on their bodies that protect them out in the wild. And as they develop from eggs, and I'll talk about the life cycle here in a minute, they develop these hard scales, which really make it hard to treat them and to get rid of them. This is a Leucanium scale, which has lots of different hosts, conifers and deciduous trees alike. But this is an example of a hard scale. You can see that shiny brown, hard protective coating over it. They really do a really good job. Mother Nature is amazing of protecting themselves as they fill their life cycle out. The other type are soft scales, so pretty easy to remember that. Soft scales don't form those hard shells, but they form kind of a cottony, fabric-y coating. I don't think that's a word, but it is today.
It is now.
It is now. A lot of the names with the soft scales have that moniker in front of them, but it's a softer protection, but a very good protection nonetheless. It protects them from predators. It protects them from a lot of conventional treatments, but those are the two delineations between the different types. So want to talk a little bit about some life cycle facts, some features about scales. And obviously there's males and females. The males do not have wings. The males have wings, the females do not have wings. So when the female is on a plant, it's not moving very far. They are not terrestrial. They will pretty much stay wherever they end up. Once the males mate, they die. The females die shortly after they form their eggs, and that protective coating will protect the eggs until they hatch. When those eggs hatch out, they become crawlers, and that's the stage of the insect that's really, really damaging to your plant. So here's a basic kind of diagram of that life cycle that they go through, kind of working in the middle here. That's a female with the eggs. When the eggs hatch, you have the male instar on the left, the female here. They look very much alike, but they change pretty consistently as they develop through those different instars. And the males will form a cocoon. They'll hatch out and they'll mate with the female and she'll form the eggs. But it's that crawler stage of the insect that's the most damaging and causes the most trouble. Here's kind of a blown up version of what you see on a plant. This is an armored or a hard scale, and you can see that protective coating over it. Underneath that female are the eggs. After she dies, she continues to protect them with her body. Those eggs will hatch out in the spring according to kind of growing degree days when it reaches the right warmth temperature. And here's a kind of a blown up general picture of what a crawler looks like. This is the stage of the insect that's the most vulnerable. That's the best time to treat it. These guys will move and they'll find a spot on the tree. They like cracks and crevices and places that can be a little bit protected. Once they find a place they want to be, they'll stay there and they'll be there for the rest of their life. But just kind of a blown up look at what those guys look like. So depending on the type of scale, depending on the host, they're going to either be on the leaf tissue on the top or the bottom, or they're going to be on the actual woody stem of a plant. And here's a kind of a cross section of where they will alight on a leaf. A lot of times they'll end up on that midrib. That's a nice place for them to kind of tuck in and have some protection, at least on one side. Others aren't as picky, just wherever they find a good spot to launch and start their kind of feeding cycle. And I blew that up to show you this. I wanted to zero in on this part of the scale. When they find where they're going to be for the rest of their lives, they anchor in. They're not terrestrial. They're not going to move around. They have very, very long mouth parts. This is the mouth part of this scale insect here and here. And you can see how far away from their bodies they go. That mouth part will move around and feed on the different tissues and fluids of that tree throughout its life cycle. They're not moving, so they're kind of hard to control and very, very inconspicuous. And I'll show you some signs of what they look like on plants just a little bit later, but wanted to kind of zero in on how they feed and start to cause damage.
Yeah, that's cool, because it looks like different scale insects will feed on different parts of the plant, which
they do.
Presumably will cause different problems.
And that's an ID characteristic to tell you what type of scale you have.
Nice.
You know, the treatments are fairly similar, but you really want to know what you have. So here's the same kind of cross section, only on a woody stem. You've got a soft scale here and a hard scale here. This is an obscure scale, which is a pest on trees. But look how far that mouth part goes. It goes through the bark, through the phloem, and gets down into the cambium, where it feeds off of those fluids of that tree. It's really quite amazing. Something so small has developed to kind of feed in this way. It's protected by this coating. It's not moving, so it's not getting any attention and less likely to be predated. And those mouth parts are fairly protected too, as it fills out its life cycle and feeds until maturity. Again, just another cross section. I took this out of a book. I cannot remember where, but I had it in another talk, and just another cross section showing the same thing. Here's that hard scale, bark, phloem, cambium, xylem. It's all the way down to the cambium. That's quite a long reach for something so small. So why? Why do trees get scales on them? Why do plants get scales on them? That's the short, easy answer, is plants that are under stress are more likely to get infected by insects. The other thing that determines that is if you have a lot of the same species that are susceptible, if you build it, they will come. If you have an environment where you have a lot of plants close together, big temperature extremes, think about a greenhouse or a structure like that, where scales are really bad pests, you're going to run across them in those types of situations. So what are some problems that scales cause? And there's quite a few. With those sucking mouth parts, they cause some of this kind of stippling. This is a sycamore leaf from a sycamore scale all the way over on the left. And that's not variegation. That on the underside of that leaf are tiny little armored scales that have pierced into the tissue and are causing that discoloration. Same down here. This is a T-scale on a, what is that?
It looks real camellia-y.
It is camellia-y. Why did that genus just size itself from my brain? I'm blaming it on the train.
There you go.
Yes, very bad pest on all camellias, species, all the cultivars. This was in one of our greenhouses. You can see that rust coloration, that stippling really, really bad. This is a juniper, and you can see that tip dieback from the feeding. The thing about scale is you saw all those eggs, and I'll show you a close-up of one a little bit later on. There are a lot of them, and when you have that many feeding on a plant, they're going to cause a lot of damage. And dieback of stems and twigs is a very, very common problem with scale insects. On a good Lord, cryptomeria.
There you go.
Very, very common cryptomeria scale. And you can see the discoloration on the tips because these females have died, the eggs have hatched, and the crawlers have started to set up all along these tips. You can see all the little discolorations where they're setting up camp and starting to feed. And this is a red maple in a commercial landscape that was covered literally from head to toe with gloomy scale, a very, very common scale that affects urban trees, maples in particular. You could scrape these things off with a credit card. It was absolutely disgusting. But you can see all the tip dieback and the stems on the very end where you've got multiple generations of scale over several years. This tree has gone untreated. They eventually ripped these out because they were so riddled with the scale that they had a lot of branch dieback, and it just completely ruined the integrity of the trees. And something that we see, and usually this is what we get asked about before people see the insects, is some secondary stuff. And on this leaf, this is a magnolia leaf. This is a sooty mold. When the scale insects feed, there's a lot of sugar residue that they exude, and that drips on the leaves, and that attracts this sooty mold, and it turns this nice, lovely black, and it almost looks like the plants have been burned. And you see this a lot with the crepe myrtle bark scale, but big scales like magnolia scale, which is a great big honking insect, they produce a lot of honeydew, and that drops on the leaves. Fire ants are attracted to that honeydew. They will actually farm the scale, and Tim and I have seen them moving crepe myrtle bark scale to other crepe myrtles so that they can kind of have these places where they can harvest that honeydew. They're not spreading it as bad as other things, but it's hard to find a warm spot in my heart for fire ants, but they will farm that insect for the honeydew, crepe myrtle bark scale and other scales as well. So you will often see a lot of ants on the trees that have scale insects. Here's some close-ups of some crepe myrtles, the crepe myrtle bark scale. Usually there are so many insects on a tree, they're producing a lot of honeydew. In the heat of the summer, when that's dripping on the leaves, you've got the right temperatures for that sooty mold to come on, and the trees are literally black with it. Anything parked underneath it, a car, a picnic table, lawn chairs. I can't tell you how many people have said, I've got all this black stuff all over my picnic table or my deck. What's going on? And it's this insect, and it's a secondary host, some extra love that you get from having these insects. So some of the scales I want to talk about aren't necessarily what I'm seeing a lot in our garden, but from a horticulture perspective, these are things that I've seen in almost every garden or any place that I've ever lived. These are pretty common ones. And I mentioned Lucanium scale earlier. This is an armored scale, and you can see how many are along this bald cypress stem. And underneath each one of these is literally thousands of eggs that are maturing and cooking up and getting ready to hatch in the spring. Those crawlers will go out on this foliage.
Nailed it.
And start to cause damage and stress the tree out. Multiple hosts for Lucanium scale, lots of different conifers. I took care of a garden in Philadelphia where we had a lot of these on, I think we had 80 different bald cypress on campus where we had these trees that we had to treat to get the population knocked down. Jeez. But they were stressed out. Drought stressed made that become a lot more prevalent and became a problem. So getting ahead of it before it became a really bad problem was crucial. But this is a very, very common scale with multiple hosts that you will see in lots of stressful situations. Here's a close-up down on the end, close to those where the needles have emerged, and this one's getting ready to open up. That female has died, and those eggs have hatched out kind of underneath there, and this is a different generation here. Cottony camellia scale is very common. We have it all through, we have a couple greenhouses where we've got some plants where they give us lots of trouble and headache. And again, multiple hosts. That's an osmanthus on the right. I think that's a magnolia leaf. The underside there, they don't delineate who they will go after. Camellias obviously are a bad one. Rhododendrons, lots of different things. Another common one that I've dealt with that's very similar to this is prunicolia scale. or cherry scale. Very, very similar, look almost identical, cause the same problems, emerges about the same time frame, but these love stressed out plants. And you'll see these on the underside of the leaf. Not hard to miss. And here's a close-up, and down in the corner there, I think this is a slide from Bugwood, University of Georgia, just to give you a sense of how tiny they are. That line down at the bottom is 1 millimeter. So these guys are pretty small. This is a soft scale. It's got that cottony protection over it that does a pretty good job protecting it from predators and environmental conditions, but very, very bad scale pest. I mentioned gloomy scale a little bit earlier. You see this a lot on red maples in the urban landscape because they're planted too high, they're suffering from severe drought stress, there's all kinds of root issues, they may have been over pruned at some point in their lives, they may have been bumped by cars, or they're in absolutely horrible soil and are stressed out. And you can see how many, it's just hundreds and hundreds and thousands of them feeding on this tree. And if that goes untreated, that'll eventually will stress the tree out to the point that it'll die. So all along the trunk, all along the branches and stems, it's a really, really bad insect that affects urban stressed out trees.
Yeah, you said you could scrape them off with a credit card. I can see that. I want to do that as badly as I don't want to do that.
That's always a good trick with somebody if you're looking at it and you don't see it. Is that take a white piece of paper and run it down the branch of the tree. And you get to squish their little scale bodies. It really rings home how many are affecting the tree. We've talked about crepe myrtle bark scale a lot here. It is a really, really bad pest and only gotten worse in the last 5 years. When I started here, we saw it in different spots of the garden, but it wasn't a bad pest. Every single crepe myrtle in the garden has this now, and we have a multiple-pronged approach to controlling this here. We've removed some just to get them out of the garden and reduce the host range. We have cut some back to let them flush out so that we're mechanically removing the pest problem from the garden. We'll use lower risk kind of products like horticultural oil, which work really, really good. And we're using some registered chemicals on someone where we've hired some professionals to help us get them under control on the biggest, most important ones in the garden to get this population under control. And this is what the insect looks like, just a mass amount of population of insect all up and down the stems of the tree. Again, this is a soft scale with that white cottony coating on it. And here's a close-up of the females. You can see this egg has been torn open and all these crawlers have hatched out underneath this dead female. And this is the stage that goes out, that's terrestrial, that's looking for new nooks and crannies. This is the stage of the insect that's the most vulnerable and easiest to control. You can use strong water, you can use horticultural oils. People ask me about neem oil. I am not a user of it, but I know people that do use it. This is the stage of that insect. That's the best way to kind of get it under control. So want to talk a little bit about management techniques, and this is a list of them. I've gleaned these from multiple sources, and they kind of make the most sense to me and kind of sum all things up. Physical removal is an easy one to do. Within reason is to physically remove the plant from the garden. That's easy on herbaceous things. That's easy on things in the greenhouse and the nursery. It's not easy on a big tree like what we have behind us, or if you've got several in your landscape. That's one way. Another way physically is to prune out. If you have just a few branches with that, is to cut those out. I can't stress enough the cultural implications of pest control. Keeping your plants stress-free, mulching, watering, pruning at the right times, planting at the right depth, good soil management, selecting good quality plants, having diverse plants in your landscape, keeping beneficial insects around, knowing what the beneficials are. Cultural is probably the most important factor of management. Mechanical is you can take a hose and you can squirt some of the scale off.
Yeah,
you can prune branches out. There are biological means that work. There are certain biological beneficial insects that'll feed on scale. Some of the lady beetles work well. There's some scale destroyer insects that will feed on those young scale, the crawler stage. Those work really, really well. Chemical, start out with something small. Horticultural oil works well when you get that crawler stage, but you have to have really, really good coverage. If you miss a section, that population's going to repopulate from that. And finally, there are some stronger chemicals that require people that are trained and have pesticide licenses to apply them correctly at the right amounts and at the right time of the year. I can't stress that enough. Just throwing an insecticide at something isn't the best way to do that. It's knowing the timing, knowing how to use the chemical, and professionals that do that kind of stuff are well suited at doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, and throwing pesticides at it willy-nilly is going to hurt your beneficial population, which is going to hurt you in the long run.
Exactly.
So it really is worth it getting a professional to do that for you.
Yep. And I think I have reached the end of the PowerPoint here. So I did bring a few props. I don't know if you know this or not, but we have a lot of Akuba in this garden. And you look at that plant and it looks fine. It's green, but it looks like there's some spots on the leaf. This is not a spotted leaf variety. Those spots are actually signs of scale. And you can see right here, quite a few of them. And that discoloration on the underside, the scale are starting to feed and do their thing and causing problems. This was in one of our greenhouses. And because we have a lot of plants in there, it does become a problem. We try to treat them as often as we can. If we get a lot of these that are just completely covered, the easiest thing to do is that mechanical version and just take the plant, throw it away. Take it out of the greenhouse, completely eliminate all those potential hosts and crawlers from jumping on other things and getting it out of the garden. So just scouting and looking for that discoloration, those are some sure signs that something's going on. And then flipping the leaf around, and you can see some things on the underside of the leaf there kind of going to work. So just getting in the garden, looking at things, scouting for troubleshooting is kind of the first step. Same thing here with these two magnolias. This is that T-scale again. Lots of hosts. You can see the discoloration on the leaves. It's not supposed to be that color, but that's a really good example there. And if you flip that around, you can see the scale on the underside going to work and doing its thing. Same thing here. You can see all those little spots and discolorations. And there's a great big one right there.
That is a big one. Wow. Look at that.
And they are soft. I'm going to squish this to kind of show you. So if you have ook factor, you might want to look away. It's not too juicy, but underneath that, and it's going to be impossible to see on the camera. Lots of eggs will be underneath that female. She's still alive. She's mated. She's protecting those. She'll die soon, and then those will hatch out, and the crawlers will go and continue that damage cycle. And this dione, relative of cycads. It's the end of the day, my brain is shriveled up to almost nothing. If you can see that, I'm not going to move it. But again, this was in our one of our greenhouses. I think this came to us with this insect on it, and kind of stressed out because it's super hot, cools off, those big temperature swings, stress these plants out. Getting the watering right for these can be a bit of a problem and cause some stress and make the insect a little more susceptible. But again, in that kind of controlled environment, it's going to be a little bit easier to get these under control with beneficials or maybe with an oil to kind of treat those. And ending on a high note, we had talked about crepe myrtle scale many, many times on this program, but here they are again. And these are some of the dwarf varieties. And you can see the sooty mold on the branches. They look kind of dirty, almost burnt. You can see the black here. And you can see all the white adults here that when the temperatures get right, those eggs will hatch out and those crawlers will go out on that new tissue and start that cycle all over again. So what we do with ones like this is a dwarf one. Tim and I have decided, let's cut them back, let them rejuvenate and see if that kind of eliminates the host cycle on some of them. And these are small enough that they're easy to treat with a horticultural oil at the right time of the year when the crawlers are emerging. And we've had pretty good success in controlling them that way. And that's all I have for show and tell and
Nice.
screen sharing.
Beautiful.
And I'm ready for all the hundreds of questions that are in people's heads.
For sure. There were some good questions. I'll say right out the bat that John just wanted some clarification. Is it all babies under one cover, or does each baby have their own cover?
So each of those scale insects, if you remember back to the Lucanium scale,
Yeah.
underneath, that is a female, and underneath her are thousands of eggs. And then the one right next to her has thousands of eggs. And then their neighbor has thousands of eggs. So there are lots of potentials for those to reproduce and go out across the stem when the crawlers hatch out and start to feed. It's a vicious cycle. Pests will reproduce quicker than beneficial insects can because of that mass population. So if you disrupt that balance with a heavy chemical, the pests are always going to win that because they produce in such large numbers. So each of those females has literally thousands of eggs underneath her, being protected from the environment, from predators and other things.
Yeah, and you said it's dependent on like degree days probably when they start to hatch out, so it's going to be different from year to year?
It's different from year to year. Way back when I first started doing this, there's an instrument called the biophenometer that measures the growing degree days. We had one at the Scott Arboretum when I worked there, and we kept up with those days with a lot of other gardens in the area. So an insect will emerge at a certain number of growing degree days. So I could go out in the garden if I knew that red-headed pine sawfly would emerge at 300 growing degree days.
Yeah.
I could go out to a mugo pine. I could see them coming out of the needles.
Nice. Yeah, sure.
So there is that data out there that has for quite a few insect pests of the garden.
Yeah.
And you can use that tool to pinpoint the best time to treat things.
Definitely.
I think it's online. It's
Okay.
it's pretty easy to find. I want to say
Sure.
Weather Underground keeps track of that.
Okay.
For your region.
Nice.
Or you could get a biophenometer if you're so inclined.
Sure.
But that's a really good tool to use.
Definitely.
And a lot of the research on controlling insects and diseases has that as kind of a backbone for treatment for things
Yeah.
like that.
You could probably, if you were to find them in your garden hatching out in their crawler stage, you could probably look around at what's blooming then, and that
That's
might be a
another
good
thing.
indicator of when they might start to come out.
Exactly. Those two things, and there's a term for that, and I can't think of it.
Okay.
But forsythia
Yeah.
blooms at a certain growing degree day.
Right, yeah.
So when forsythia is blooming, you know that it's time to go check.
Right.
If you're in your garden anyway, kind of looking at things and anticipating that, you're going to catch these things before they become really, really big problems.
Sure. Okay, that's cool. Like an ounce of prevention.
Science.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Ross wants to know, if you wash soft scale crawlers off of a plant with a stream of water, won't the crawlers just climb back onto the plant?
They are so small and so tiny that it's going to be hard for them to work their way back up to that tissue area where they can pierce their mouth parts. Certain scale, some of the soft scales that are on leaves aren't going to do that same damage. Their mouth parts aren't developed to go into the bark. So if you knock them off, the Achilles heel of that is if you miss a little valley in a, you think about the fissures in the crepe myrtle behind us. If you miss a branch, if you miss a side where there's a good population, those are just going to repopulate next year, continue to spread. That's where registered insecticides that are systemic and go through the plants do such a good job. You're not using as much of a chemical. It's going straight into that plant, and it's going to have the kind of the best control. But we don't all have access to that.
Right. Rachel's asking, what about using a soil drench to control crepe myrtle scale? Are there ones that are available without a license, or?
I'm not aware of any, no.
Okay.
A lot of those chemicals require, the timing of using them is crucial. The rates is very, very crucial.
Yeah.
So that's where people that are trained and that do that on a regular basis are going to know all those things and put them out, and that's going to have the least amount of impact on the environment. It's easy to buy something in a store like an herbicide, and nobody reads the labels, and just goes out, and if it says 4 ounces per gallon, I'm going to put 20 ounces per gallon.
Jeez.
Or it says to wear goggles and safety glasses. I'm not going to do that. I don't need to do that. I'm sure Rachel will do a good job, but that's not everybody. So the chemicals are very expensive. There's been a lot of research to get them to that point of being safe and using less amount of active ingredients. Again, to limit that impact. Most of the ones that work really well. What we've used on our trees is a soil drench.
Nice. Okay. And we had professionals do it.
Yes.
Nice. All right. So Karen says, when treating one plant for scale that is surrounded by the same plant that does not have the scale, should you go ahead and treat all of the plants in that area or just the infected one?
I would say just the infected one. If they're all the same type of plant, a good example of that is Prunicolia scale.
Okay.
They affect cherry trees. They also get on azaleas and rhododendrons. That was a big pest in my garden in Philadelphia. And if I had it on one azalea in a grouping of them, I would treat all of them. Because more than likely, I'm just not seeing every little insect that's on those.
Sure.
If it's the same type of azalea, they're going to find their way on that. So I would prophylactically treat all of those.
Sure.
Just to be on the safe side. And what I was treating them with was just a horticultural oil.
Okay.
So it was a relatively safe thing for me and for the plants and other insects and garden critters.
Sure. Okay.
If they're different species, they're very host specific.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So what do you do with infected branches that you've cut off?
We will throw them in the trash dumpster.
Okay.
I don't want to put them in my compost because I don't want them kind of hanging around. Chances are they're not going to live once they're off the tree and away from the source that's going to keep them alive. The small ones that we cut out of the garden, or Tim and I are digging them out, we'll put them right into the dumpster. Composting them, it's probably okay, but we try to throw stuff away as much as we can.
Sure.
For something like crepe myrtle.
Yeah, definitely. With how ubiquitous the pest is, you don't want to.
No.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Eugene had an interesting question. I will just read it. He says, I have a severe scale infestation on my American beautyberry. Lots of sooty mold too. A crepe myrtle 20 feet away has a few scales at the base. Is it the same scale? And can I use my 30-year-old or more Saigon banned by the EPA for control?
All right, let me answer the first question. And the second question just gave me some PSTD. We are starting to see some host jumping with crepe myrtle bark scale. And Steve Franks, the entomologist here at NC State, is all over that. We've seen it on Calocarpa. We've seen it on a couple of other things. It's within close proximity of crepe myrtles that are covered with it. And it's got to be the same thing. But there are other scale insects that feed on other plants because they're not related.
Sure.
They're not the same family. you see a lot of that stuff within the same family. But stay tuned on that.
Okay.
There are other people looking at that as well, but it's not a surprise. You know, the population has gotten so big, they're on so many plants, it's gonna crash, and it's gonna go on other things. Whether or not it's gonna affect them or not is a whole nother thing. Saigon is a horrible insecticide. Many years ago, they used to use that to treat hemlock woolly adelgid.
Okay.
And it was put on a bark drench.
Sure.
So it was so horrible that it would soak through all those layers of the bark and get into the tree and then get taken up. It's non-specific. There's lots of reasons why it's banned. And when things get old, it changes the dynamics and the complexities of what they are. You can look online for pesticide disposal. A lot of times extension sites will have pesticide rodeos where they'll have a site where you can bring your pesticides to get rid of them, because they don't want you using them. They don't want you dumping them down the drain.
Right.
They don't want you putting them in the trash. They will take them and dispose of them in a sustainable way.
Nice.
So it doesn't happen all the time, but I know it does happen. Check the extension. You ask your extension agent. They're going to know the answer to that kind of question.
Cool. That's a hot tip, and I'm glad you asked that question, because some of us might have, leftover chemicals. Like, how do we get rid of them? There are responsible ways to do it. Please do those.
Don't be like people I know and say it came from the earth, it's going back to the earth. Don't do that.
Okay. So I didn't write down who wrote this one, but if we see scale on trees now, is it safe to prune that tree now?
You can prune now. Now's a good time because you can see the structure of trees to do some pruning. And if you see it, sure, that's a good time to cut it and get rid of it. I walked all over the Arboretum today looking for magnolia scale. Is a great big honking insect.
Sure.
And I thought for sure I'd find one or two. I couldn't find any, but now's a good time of the year to look for that sort of thing. Now's not a good time of the year to use any kind of chemical treatment.
Sure.
One of the things that horticultural oil does is it covers that insect's body and keeps it from respiring and breathing. And you will have some success controlling adults that way, but it's better to wait until those little soft-bodied crawlers come out and then treat them for treatment with something like an oil.
Yeah, and John was asking a question about treating with oil. When you treat with oil, do you have to treat more than once?
Yes, that's a good question. Getting scales under control is going to take more than 1 year of treatment. Okay. So Blake mentioned that we've treated some trees here in the Arboretum. We're going to have to do that for several years to get that under control because the population is just so large, and we want to keep these older legacy trees happy and healthy. We are encouraging people not to plant crepe myrtles anymore. Because it is such a problem. Sure. It's a very important urban tree. Yeah. I don't think it should be eliminated from people's choices. Totally. But it's something to keep in mind when you're taking care of them. But something like scale insects are really hard to control, and it's going to take multiple years to get them under control. Don't expect to treat them once with any of the measures that I talked about and have 100% success, because you won't. The bigger the plant, the harder to get it under control. I remember the days of, my brain is open now to the hemlock woolly adelgid. We had 100-foot tall hemlocks that we were treating in Philadelphia with horticulture oil and spraying on the ground up into a 100-foot tree. Yeah. You're not going to get every single insect. No kidding. And the population is going to come back. It's going to take multiple attempts to get that under control. For sure. Persistence is key. Yep. Absolutely. Okay, so Sharon would like a little bit of clarification. She says, so are the scales already inside the tree, dormant and activated when the tree is stressed? Or how do they get on the tree? So they get on the tree different ways. A lot of times you buy them at not a lot of times. Some nurseries, they're on the plant when you buy them. Sure. Oftentimes they're hiding underneath the leaves. You don't necessarily see them. The growers don't necessarily see them. It can be real easy to bring in. Yes. If you have a neighbor that doesn't understand integrated pest management, you could get plant, you can get that problem from them. They move around in the wind. They'll land on, when birds land in trees, they'll get some crawlers on their feet and they'll hop to another tree, and that starts the cycle. They move around that way. They're not actually in the plant. They're moving around from that perspective. If you've got one crepe myrtle in an urban planting where they've got 75, they're just going to work their way down through.
Totally.
The plants are stressed out. They're more susceptible. The wind's going to blow crawlers. They're not moving around that much. They don't move that far. So wind and rain and birds and squirrels and other things.
And ants farming them, that's wild.
Yeah. And again, they're not going to take them that far.
Sure, yeah.
But, where we've seen it here is they're moving, it looks like they're moving them within the same plant. They're not packing up and going from the fantasy circle down to the necessary.
Yeah.
Within the same plant. That sounds like a monster movie kind of an idea.
Right.
They're packing up here, they're getting on the train, and they're going down to Durham to cause some havoc.
Aren't they just? Geez. Okay, let's see. Other questions. Bridget says she has new property. How can she encourage more beneficial pests to take up residence?
There are some that you can buy and release. A lot of times the easiest way to do that is just to have a good plant diversity in your landscape.
For sure.
Leaving leaves and spent flowers for a period of time so that they can go through their life cycles. They overwinter in leaves and litter, and eggs and adults will do that. So those are some good things to use, ideas to do. Don't use broad spectrum insecticides
for sure
that kill everything.
Yeah.
Have a higher threshold of tolerance for pests.
Absolutely.
And diseases, but diversity is the easiest way to make
for
that
sure.
happen.
If you build it, they will come.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very relevant there.
Yep.
Okay. And we will do one final question.
Sure.
So Carolyn says that she's battled hard scale on her key lime trees and also on her orchid plants from time to time. She says we didn't mention those plants, but she usually takes great joy in squishing them and then spraying the plant. She wants to know, is that enough?
It's easier on small things.
Yeah, for sure.
Than it is big things like this.
Yeah, definitely.
You're going to have better control, and even just taking your orchid outside and giving it a good spray with the hose. Did she say key lime?
Yeah.
If it's easy enough to move that and blasting it with the heavy streams of water,
definitely,
that's gonna reduce the number of pests. Or taking it outside and under the pesticide guidelines of horticultural oil, spraying it outside and getting underneath and on top where those insects might be. It's easier to control plants like that than things that are in the landscape.
For sure. I grow bonsai trees, and sometimes you get little scales on your juniper, but it's tiny little tree and you love it dearly, so you're willing to go through and literally physically remove them, and that's more than enough.
Yeah.
Like, I've never lost a tree to scale, but I am constantly putting in more effort than sane people do into reducing it. So that's my cross to bear. Thank you. Okay. Wow. That appears to be all of the questions that we had for today. So thank you so much, Greg, for pulling together this presentation and teaching us all about scales. That was really interesting. And I'm sure we learned a lot of good tidbits about pest management generally, not just for scales.
I hope so.
Thank you for that. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Midweek program today. I do not remember what we're doing next week, but I assure you there is something going on next week. Indeed, Evan and Sophia will be talking about dead versus dormant, how to tell if your plants are still alive. So thank you guys so much for watching this all the way to the end, for joining us live, giving us all your amazing questions. Those of you that watched it to the end on YouTube, thank you so much. Make sure you are subscribed to our channel. Make sure you have liked this video, and be sure to leave a comment, even if it's just an emoji of a little seedling getting attacked by a bug next to it. Just for the sake of engagement, it really does help our channel out a lot. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We will see you all next time. Y'all take care.